How you doing? What show are we on?
Truth is viral.
The truth is viral, people. So take 2 penicillins and call me in the morning.
You're watching The Truth is Viral, the only news program on the internet trusted to deliver the truth since 2008. And now, here's your host, Mr. Bobby Powell.
For those of you that don't already know, my name is Bob Powell. I publish a conservative Christian news program called The Truth is Viral. And as I said before, we're streaming live on the Guerrilla Media Network, G1 NBC, and the Santilli Broadcasting Network, and the millions who watch Liberty One TV. Now, apart from being a father, the 3 most important and formative roles that I've played in my life have been as a journalist, a United States Marine, and a Christian. Those roles have prepared me for my adult life, teaching me the importance of 3 things: honor, duty, and truth. Some people have forgotten those concepts. Some people never learned them to begin with. But they're what drive me and influence everything that I do. When I raised my right hand as a new recruit in Parris Island and swore to defend this nation from all enemies, foreign and domestic, I don't recall being issued an expiration date. I will remain a Marine under oath, even in death, standing at attention in a horizontal fashion for eternity in a smart, orderly, and proficient military manner, until Gabriel blows his horn and calls me home to be with our Lord. Can I get a new raw? All right. Now, when I completed my tour of duty, I went to college in Detroit, earned a degree in broadcast journalism, and because I'd always been a news hound, I loved it. I've worked as an editor and journalist in newspapers, radio, and television since 1986, and I have to tell you that journalism today looks nothing like it did 30 years ago. The politically motivated lies that pass for mainstream media today would make Edward R. Murrow and Walter Cronkite puke, spinning in their graves. The mainstream media couldn't tell the truth that their lives depended on it. Notice I didn't say couldn't. They absolutely could, but they just refused to do it because the truth doesn't support their left-wing agenda. President Trump is 100% correct, labeling the press fake news and an enemy of the people, because that's exactly what they are. Network news channels like CNN and MSNBC and legacy newspapers like the New York Times and Washington Post aren't even pretending to be honest brokers of the truth anymore. They publish stories that are patently untrue, and any truth that may be revealed is hidden deep within the body of a story and not emphasized at all. Journalists call this burying the lead. Parkland student David Hogg was on Brian Stelter's CNN program recently and was making all kinds of factual errors and false assertions. Stelter knew that Hogg was spewing fake news, but he didn't even attempt to correct him. Stelter let him continue with his comments, saying whatever he wanted, no matter how untrue his statements were. I can't lay all the blame on Hogg and Stelter because there's so much to spread around among the television talking heads and various anti-gun weirdos that they trot out to spew moronic left-wing talking points. When they're not flat out lying about guns, they prove their tragic ignorance every time they open their mouths. About a dozen newly minted high school and anti-gun activists have emerged after the Parkland shooting, and the media is tripping all over themselves to have these kids on their shows. And it's obvious that these kids don't have any idea what they're talking about. I've listened to their interviews, I've read their tweets, and I'm pretty sure that they don't even teach civics or history at Parkland High School, or spelling, for that matter. They'll say and do anything to promote their agenda, blatantly lying to get a cheer from the crowds of the leftists that they address. Several months before Michael Bloomberg and George Soros financed the March for Our Lives that took place in Washington, D.C., David Hogg tweeted that even though he was an atheist, there might be a God because he had no homework over winter break. But when he ended his speech at the D.C. protest, he raised his fist like every communist gun grabber before him and shouted, "God bless you and God bless America." What a hypocrite. I'm surprised his tongue didn't catch fire in his mouth. There's no level to which these people won't stoop in order to get their point across, even if the point is invalid. and the media allows them to get away with it because they make for good television as they work to strip away our rights. Despite their painful ignorance of the Constitution, gun laws, or even the basic functions of a firearm, the media has raised them up to be the new face of the anti-gun agenda, while ignoring other Parkland students like Kyle Kashev and Hunter Pollock, who have actually accomplished something in the form of legislation in the aftermath of the Parkland shooting. When President Trump invited the Parkland students and their parents to come to the White House for a listening session, Hogg proudly hung up on the White House official that made the call. I guess he had boycotts to plan and books to sell. Well, those boycotts didn't work out so well, though, did they? Gun sales are up. The NRA's membership is at an all-time high. Laura Ingram's ratings jumped 20%, and so have sales of MyPillow, whose founder refused to be bullied by these kids. A couple of companies did cave to Hogg's bullying tactics, though, some eagerly, like Dick's Sporting Goods, due to their new and, might I add, unconstitutional policy to stop selling rifles to anybody under 21 and to stop selling the AR platform altogether. Every gun manufacturer in the country has decided to stop doing business with Dick's. I guess the moral to the story is, don't be dicks. Now, if I were fortunate enough to have David Hogg on my show, and I do think I'd be fortunate because it would be awesome, the first question I would ask him would be, can you recite the Second Amendment? And I guarantee you he wouldn't be able to do it. I'm willing to bet that he wouldn't be able to do it, and to go further, I know for a fact that he and his cohorts wouldn't be able to explain the reasoning behind the founders' decision when they decided to write it. 3 months ago, these kids were eating Tide Pods and snorting condoms. But now, God help us, the media holds out these foul-mouthed brats to be constitutional legal scholars and role models for the next generation. And you're not allowed to rebut their garbage arguments either. If anyone tries to counter any of their bull snot with facts, they're banned from social media for bullying and harassment. I know this for a fact because it's happened to me more than once. Immune to criticism, these kids are allowed to bully and harass gun owners and businesses that support the Second Amendment all they want. And they slander the good names of Second Amendment defenders like Dana Lash, using the most despicable language to call us complicit in the murders of children just because we belong to the NRA and support the Second Amendment. A few days ago, Tucker Carlson had New Mexico congressional candidate Pat Davis on his show. Davis, a Democrat, of course, was getting inked because of his F the NRA television advertisement. Tucker asked him, how many mass shootings have been committed by NRA members? Davis refused to answer the question because he knows that the answer is 0. And Tucker tore him up. A second Davis campaign spot claimed that an AR-15 can fire 150 rounds a minute, which is actually about twice the actual rate of fire for a good shooter using a semi-automatic rifle. And I'm not even counting the time that it takes to change out a 30-round mag. Because maybe Davis used one of those full semi-automatic ghost guns to run his test. I don't know. I'd like to one if it can fire 150 rounds a minute. Now, if he gets elected, he'll be fast friends with California Democrat Representative Eric Swalwell, who recently called for a repeal of the Second Amendment. And I have to give him credit, though, because he was honest. Most of these lying gun grabbers will repeat the phrase over and over again, we don't want to take your guns, we don't want to take your guns, we don't want to take your guns, over and over like it's a Tibetan meditation chant. But Swalwell had no problem telling us that confiscating guns is exactly what he wants to do. And he's not alone. Former Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens wrote an editorial in the New York Times calling for the repeal of the Second Amendment 2 months ago. Attention horror, Shannon Watts, the dimmest bulb in the universe and head of Michael Bloomberg's funded Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, wants to take your guns too. She recently tweeted out a photo of a scary-looking black rifle to Sportsman's Warehouse demanding that they stop selling it. It wasn't an AR-15. It wasn't even a semi-automatic rifle. The rifle in question was a .22 caliber bolt-action Ruger. I want so badly to respond to her stupidity on Twitter with 280 characters of brutal truth, but I don't dare, because whenever she's confronted with a fact, she blocks the person who presented it, and I need to be able to keep my eye on her so I can keep up with her lies. These people regularly inflate the numbers of school shootings in the U.S. while taking great pains to ignore the carnage on the streets of Chicago, where failed liberal governance, political correctness that fails to recognize the problem, and gang wars have resulted in more casualties since 2003 than soldiers who have been killed in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. I guess those black lives don't matter to gun control activists. If Chicago does happen to be mentioned, they say, well, the guns came from states with lax gun laws like Indiana. But that logic is fatally flawed. It's called liberal logic, because more guns equals more violence, they say. But if that were the case, Indianapolis would be the war zone, and not Chicago, where guns are all but banned. According to facts, the vast majority of gun homicides in Chicago are committed by drug gangs, and nearly all of the victims are black, which is a politically inconvenient truth for the press. But Chicago only ranks 25th on the list of America's most violent cities. If one were to discount similar murders in the top 4 Democratic-run hellholes of St. Louis, Baltimore, New Orleans, and Detroit, the United States would be the 4th safest country on the planet. Instead of offering common sense gun solutions, like posting armed guards in schools, which, assuming 1 guard per school, would create 8,000 jobs in Texas alone, what do Democrats suggest that we do to protect ourselves from a bad guy with a deadly weapon? Well, in one school district in Pennsylvania, they started outfitting each room in their schools with a bucket of rocks that students can throw at an active shooter. The University of Colorado suggests that female students being attacked by a rapist piss their pants to spoil his libido. Have you ever heard anything so stupid and idiotic in your life? I think my method's better. I trained my daughters to draw down on anyone who would assault them and make him piss his pants instead.
Yeah.
After the shooting in Santa Fe, liberals all over the country once again raised the battle cry. Republicans and the NRA have blood on their hands before the bodies of those 10 precious children were even cold. Would you like me to tell you who and what is responsible for the violence that we're seeing today? The blood is on the hands of Democrats who turned our cities into ghettos, destroying black families so they can keep voters who are dependent on the government to survive. In his new song, Ye versus the People, rap artist Kanye West observes, that's the problem with this damn nation. All blacks gotta be Democrats. Man, we ain't made it off the plantation. The blood is on the hands of radical leftist teachers who have been teaching their students to think of all conservatives as Nazis that must be killed. The blood is on the hands of video game manufacturers who create games like Grand Theft Auto, where the object of the game is to assault, shoot, and run over as many innocent people as possible, while raping hookers, robbing liquor stores, and slaughtering police officers just because they wear a uniform. Our children are being desensitized by these video games. Their innate morality and empathy for others is being destroyed. And when they go out into the real world to carry out one of these horrific attacks, they act like they are still playing that game. The blood is on the hands of know-nothing, hypocritical actors and actresses in liberal Hollywood. They use their popularity to demand stricter gun control while they themselves are protected by armed security, and then go on to make movies which glorify gun violence. The blood is on the hands of anarcho-communist terrorist groups like Antifa and By Any Means Necessary, who take kids out into the streets to cause mayhem and punch Nazis because that's the cool thing to do. I have zero love for real Nazis, But if you have conservative values, respect our flag, and love our Constitution, then you are automatically a Nazi in the eyes of the left. The blood is on the hands of high school students who bully, marginalize, or ostracize kids that look different, act different, or lack age-appropriate social skills. Parkland student Emma Gonzalez admitted such behavior in her first televised speech, and I quote, "Since he was in middle school, it was no surprise to anyone who knew him to hear that Nicholas Cruz was the shooter. Those talking about how we should not have ostracized him didn't know this kid, okay? We did." Maybe if Nicholas Cruz hadn't been ostracized, maybe if his peers had lived up to all their kumbaya virtue signaling and acted like they gave a damn about him, he would not have decided to take revenge for years of abuse, and 14 children and 3 teachers would still be alive. The blood is on the hands of Big Pharma, which encourages doctors to prescribe potent psychotropic drugs to kids that don't need them, labeling them with made-up diagnoses like ADHD. You know, the treatment for ADHD is Ritalin or Adderall. It's basically methamphetamines. That's what real Nazis gave their troops to allow them to commit atrocities and not be racked by guilt. Every mass shooter in modern times, every single one, has had one thing in common. They were all on antidepressant medication, usually an SSRI. And the blood is on the hands of those who have refused to accept these simple truths. Almost all school shootings and or school-related acts of violence have been committed by those taking or withdrawing from psychiatric drugs. Between 2004 and 2012, there were nearly 15,000 reports to the FDA's MedWatch system on psychiatric drugs that caused violent side effects. I remember when I was a kid, the hardware store sold dynamite over the counter to farmers who needed to remove tree stumps or big rocks. Teenagers at my high school used to come to school with their hunting rifles on a rack on their trucks. There wasn't a rash of bombings or school shootings back then, but that was 50 years ago. So what's changed? Our society has changed to become more self-centered, greedy, and violent. The problem is a sickness in the hearts of Americans, a sickness that has been fed by the media and fake news outlets like CNN and MSNBC, a sickness that's been growing like a cancer since the 60s when God was taken out of our schools. Secular humanism is the new religion, and morality and empathy plays no role in it. This is truly the me generation. This sad state of affairs was prophesied by the Apostle Paul in the book of 2 Timothy. He wrote, "In the last days there will be very difficult times, for people will love only themselves and their money. They will be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents, and ungrateful. They will consider nothing sacred. They will be unloving and unforgiving. They will slander others and have no self-control. They will be cruel and hate what is good. They will betray their friends. They will be reckless and puffed up with pride and love pleasure rather than God." Does that sound familiar, patriots? Hasn't the world become exactly the way Paul said it would be? The violence that we're seeing in our society today is one thing that the left cannot blame on guns or Christian conservative white men. We fought against the neo-communist agenda that's infected our schools and our culture, and we lost because we didn't fight hard enough. We were too afraid to offend anybody, and the violence that we're witnessing now is the result of a generation of progressive liberals who got their way like spoiled kids. Even though communism has failed every time that it's been tried and left a trail of 100 million dead bodies in its wake, those on the far left will cheat, lie, and steal to make their dream of a communist utopia come to pass. People say that tyranny can't possibly come to America. Those people are wrong. And the founders knew it 200 years before they were born. The fact that more than a dozen top-ranking government officials conspired to conceal the crimes of Hillary Clinton and make up crimes with which to bring down the duly elected president of these United States is absolute proof that there is a seditious deep state that will do anything to maintain power, even commit treason. This is why the founders wrote the Second Amendment, so that we can protect our natural rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness against tyrants in our own government, if necessary. Lost in the conversation about guns is the fact that the Second Amendment is not about personal protection. The Second Amendment is not about hunting. The founders were not fearful of a deer uprising. The Second Amendment was written to give we the people the ability to shoot back at a government turned over to tyrants so that we could maintain the freedom that they fought, bled, and died for their children to enjoy. Even if those who would see us disarmed were able to ban semi-automatic rifles, and I'm not going to call them assault rifles because there's no such thing, it would make precious little difference to those determined to take the lives of innocents. Bill Clinton's ban on AR-15 in the 90s proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt. The ban did not affect the numbers of shootings at all, but it did screw the Democrats out of a midterm victory. And Republican lawmakers need to remember that lesson. Guns are not the enemy. They're simply tools. The enemy is the so-called resistance, progressive values, violent video games and music, and psychotropic drugs that are turning our children into killers. If someone determined to kill can't use a gun, they will use any other method at their disposal. Say Fulo Saipov swore allegiance to ISIS and used a rental truck to kill 8 and injure 7 more on a bike path in New York City last year. And the ISIS magazine Inspire is telling wannabe jihadists how to commit terrorist attacks without conventional weapons. Also in New York, a man by the name of Julio Gonzalez killed 87 people when he used a few gallons of gasoline and a book of matches to torch the Happy Land Social Club in the Bronx. The ISIS-inspired Sarnea brothers used pressure cookers filled with crushed up 4th of July sparklers to kill, free, and injure hundreds more at the Boston Marathon. Timothy McVeigh snuffed out the lives of 168 innocent people and maimed another 680 when he blew up the Alfred B. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City with a rental truck filled with fertilizer and racing fuel. In the worst terrorist attack the U.S. has ever experienced, Muslim terrorists killed more than 3,000 people using nothing more than box cutters and pepper spray. America does not have a gun problem, patriots. We have a problem of the heart. And until somebody can come up with a test that can determine the contents of a person's soul, there will always be evil people who will use any method at their disposal to kill innocents at school, at work, or at play. Further restricting guns is not the answer, especially not now that we are at war with radical Islam and the far left, whose inexplicable hatred for Donald Trump and those who voted him into office is driving them to betray our country and commit horrible crimes against innocent Americans. When any trip to our children's schools, a mall, a sporting event, or a movie theater can turn into a life or death situation, we the people must be armed and ready to meet that threat and neutralize it. Every single one of you is a member of the militia mentioned in the Second Amendment, and you must be prepared to defend yourselves, your families, and your communities from crazies, religious fanatics, and tyrants. We've grown soft, spoiled by microwave dinners, cable television, and the wonders of the internet. We suffer from what's called normalcy bias, which causes us to discount and deny that there are any real threats to our freedom out there. We must get serious about the security of our country, ourselves, and our children. We can never let our guard down, because that's how you get killed. Our forefathers fought a war in the name of liberty and carved out a new nation rooted in truth and the natural rights of men, establishing a government based on the Constitution that John Adams stated was made only for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. If we wish to remain free men and women, we must remember that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. So when this rally is over, I want you to go forth from this place, patriots. Remain vigilant and pray that our martial skills will never be called upon to defend our lives or the Republic. God bless each one of you. Semper Fi and hoorah.
Thank you for watching The Truth is Viral with your host, Bobby Powell. Make sure to follow The Apocalypse on Twitter at The Truth is Viral. Like The Truth is Viral on Facebook, and if you can, please remember to donate to the cause via PayPal at www.bobpowell.blogspot.com.